Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 80 based on novel. So let's start. Qian Devil King heard what Qin Mu said and was slightly stunned, then instantly understood what he was saying. This restricted area in the forest was not to defend against the invasion of enemies, but to prevent people of Carefree Village from walking out. If it was to defend against outside enemies, then only people who barged in would be attacked by the restricted area. Whereas here, no matter if people were trying to go in or to come out, they would all receive ruthless obliteration. The ruins to the side should be the path that the people of Carefree Village had opened up by force to escape Carefree Village, and not a path that had formed naturally. To understand the situation from the slightest clue, ordinary people would have never noticed this. The ones who taught this brat are definitely absolute villains that are incomparably cunning. Qian Devil King shuddered uncontrollably. It was obvious that the heavenly devils that had clung to the ship hadn't escaped Qin Mu's detection. The reason he didn't reveal his knowledge was to have them test the path. Such a ruthless and sinister youth would definitely have absolute villains for his teachers. Qian Devil King sized up the restricted area and thought to himself, with just the moon ship, we can't enter this place. Moon ship is too huge, and if we barged in, we would definitely trigger the restricted area. If it was so simple for the restricted area to obliterate that female devil god, destroying the moon ship shouldn't be too troublesome either. Just as he thought this, the moon ship suddenly trembled and gradually squatted down. A huge tremor shook the enormous three-legged ship as it lay down on the floor and stopped moving. Qian Devil King immediately felt the heavenly god aura around Qin Mu gave disappear, and he let out a sigh of relief. If Qin Mu had driven the moon ship into the restricted area, even he would have been destroyed. Even though Qin Mu had seen the destruction of Carefree Village, he still possessed his rationality, which astonished Qian Devil King. He then kicked the dragon Qilin awake. The dragon Qilin shook his head and followed behind him while asking in a low and muffled voice, "Iron Lump, where are we?" Qian Devil King became furious. "You slept all the way, and still have the face to ask me." The dragon Qilin smiled. "You also don't know where we are. Apparently, you have also slept all the way." At the center of the huge pillars, Qin Mu's body returned back to normal, and he pulled back his legs that had sunk into the ship. The body of the ship had fused with his legs, but since Qin Mu's body had grown extremely gigantic earlier, he had left huge footprints after he had shrunk in size. This allowed him to pull out his legs. Qin Mu stood up, and his mind immediately trembled. He was incomparably weak at that moment, and the divine treasures that had been opened up by the huge amount of energy from the moon ship closed one after another. Only spirit embryo and 5 elements divine treasures did not leave him. The ship's energy was too great for the current him, so if he wanted to control it, he had to exhaust his life force as a price. Yang Jingjing has always lived on the sun ship, so she had exhausted way more life force than me. It's been really hard on her. Qin Mu took in 2 deep breaths, and consumed some spirit pills to supplement his body. He rose then and said, "Devil King, Fatty Dragon, let's enter this restricted area." Qian Devil King let out a shaky breath and said, "You're planning to use my knowledge and vision to avoid the dangers, and find the villains of your village?" Qin Mu nodded. "You are the Devil King of Qian world, the king of devil gods. Your knowledge and vision are much greater than mine, so only you can bring me in." Qian Devil King laughed out loud and said proudly, "That's right. Only I can bring you in and out safely, you can lick my feet." Qin Mu's expression changed slightly, and Qian Devil King immediately changed his words as he laughed. "I'm joking, look at you. I can bring you in and out, but you must release me as you promised. You agreed to it." Qin Mu smiled. "Don't worry, I will definitely not eat my words. I can sign the Pact of Earth Count with you." Qian Devil King shook his head. "No need for that. If we sign the Pact of Earth Count, I won't believe you anymore. You will definitely dig a hole for me to jump into." Qin Mu laughed coarsely and thought to himself, Qian Devil King really knows me well. With just a verbal promise, I find it embarrassing to trick him. Grandpa Cripple is right, I'm still too kind. He jumped onto the dragon Chilean's back, and Juqian, Devil King, also got on. Fire clouds grew under the dragon Chilean's feet, and they slowly descended onto the ground. Soon, they reached the edge of the restricted area. Juqian, Devil King, was extremely nervous, and spat out a few gears from his mouth. Even though there's a safe path here, this safe path was established from inside. If we follow it to walk out, there won't be much danger, but if we use it to walk in, we'll face quite some danger. You must keep close to me and not take the wrong path. If you trigger the restricted area, we'll all die. Qin Mu immediately moved forward and opened up the god statue's chest to adjust the gears there. Adding a few more spare parts, he reminded Devil King, don't try to play any tricks, or you will be trapped as well. Juqian, Devil King, replied in a bad mood, don't worry, I understand. Stick close. Qin Mu followed after him, and the 4 faces and 12 eyes of Juqian, Devil King, looked around. His 4 mouths muttered as he saw through the dangers in the restricted area, and did his calculations. Qin Mu even saw Juqian, Devil King, using his devil chi to execute methods of space calculation. Countless numbers and runes moved in the air, as he did incomparably complicated calculations. Devil King, your attainments in algebra are extremely high, Qin Mu said in astonishment. Juqian, Devil King, replied in a bad mood, you don't say. If you don't learn your algebra properly, you will only know the form of most of the divine arts, but not their essence. Can you teach me? Qin Mu asked with excitement. I have a canon of supreme mystery, which I still have yet to study thoroughly. Canon of supreme mystery uses the divinatory symbols of the 8 divinatory trigrams to represent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's an octal number system, which is quite thorny. Juqian, Devil King, said in astonishment, octal number system. You will have to use the 8 trigrams to calculate, which are heaven, earth, thunder, water, mountain, wind, flame, and lake. If you use numbers to replace them, it would be quite troublesome to calculate, but if you use the 8 trigrams as an abacus to operate the transformation, that would be much easier. We'll talk later, don't talk to me now. If I calculate wrongly, we are all finished. Juqian, Devil King's attainments in algebra weren't extremely high, but simply too profound to understand for normal people. A sentence he had said without thinking gave Qin Mu the feeling of having been enlightened. He had been studying the canon of supreme mystery these days, but he didn't achieve much. It was too profound and calculating it was incomparably troublesome. However, if he used the 8 trigrams as an abacus, it would become an exquisite tool for calculation. All the problems that he had faced could easily be solved. There's not only the octal number system from the 8 divinatory trigrams. There is also yin and yang binary, 4 phases quaternary system. Qin Mu managed to deduce many things from one answer. There were many mathematical physics in canon of supreme mystery, but there were no tools of calculation listed there. After getting advice from Juqian, Devil King, he finally had a chance to actually comprehend the canon of supreme mystery completely. If I wanted to do that, I would need to have a formation for calculation, the 8 trigrams of THG. Qin Mu took out the canon of supreme mystery, and browsed through it. His vital chi transformed into the 4 phases of yin and yang before forming the runes of the 8 divinatory trigrams, which floated in front of him. With a pull of his hand, the 8 trigrams of THG split into 49 copies. The yin and yang revolved, the 4 phases operated, and the 8 divinatory trigrams transformed. So that's how the Dain calculation in canon of supreme mystery works. Qin Mu looked at the transformation diagram, and muttered as numbers formed in his mind. Don't be distracted, the back face of Juqian, Devil King, scolded him. Qin Mu immediately dispersed the 8 trigrams. With Juqian, Devil King, leading the way, he considered himself safe. Juqian, Devil King, was the ruler of Juqian world, after all, so his knowledge and vision far surpassed that of Qin Mu. Even though he didn't have the ability to break the restrictions in this restricted area, avoiding them were not difficult for him. In addition, the restrictions along the path had already been broken by people from the inside. Village chief and the rest had also broken the restrictions by force, so the journey was relatively safe. In no time, they came to the first ruins and Qin Mu stopped. This place was a village with only 4 households. The pots, bowls, and stoves were all still here, but no one lived here anymore. Qin Mu saw 11 graves, but there was no tombstone erected. The yellow dirt grave was big, but he saw no clue who was buried inside. This place is safe, Juqian Devil King said. Qin Mu walked into the village and looked around. Suddenly, his heart trembled when he saw a cradle in one of the households. There was also a wooden horse and a few infants' clothing on the bed, which looked very delicate. On the chest of one of the pieces of clothing was a word Qin sewed on. Qin Mu took out the jade pendant, which also had the word Qin on it. The youth closed his eyes for a long time. There were no tears in his eyes when he opened them, as they were long dried up. Is this my home? He walked past the kitchen stove and looked at the pots hanging above it, the bowls covered on the table. He wanted to find more items, to obtain more information, but there were no more clues. He came to the door and suddenly froze. He stood there silently. There was a 11 word pasted on the door. Even though there was no wind and rain here, the passage of time had faded the handwriting. This 11 word meant that the owners of this house had married. They had married right in this restricted area. The small wooden horse in this courtyard must have been prepared for the unborn child by the owner of this house. The delicate clothing should have been tailored for that child as well. It's time to go, Juqian Devil King hurried him. Once this is done, I'll be returning. I don't want to stay another day in your goddamn world. Qin Mu sorted out his emotions and continued to head deeper into the restricted area with him. 4 hours later, they came to another ruin. This was a small town with about 100 households. Outside the ruin, there were rows and rows of graves. Qin Mu walked around and saw that there was a school in the town, so there should have been youths learning knowledge here. Once upon a time, this should have been a bustling place where people came and went. Even there was the incomparably treacherous restricted area just outside, this place should have been brimming with life. Yet in the next village, only 4 households were left. They continued to venture forward, and the third ruin was a city. Huge pieces of shattered spirit weapons were scattered all over the ground here. If these were sold in Eternal Peace Empire, one would definitely become the richest person in the world, but here they just lay all around. Let's continue, Qin Mu said solemnly. We're so dead. Granny Sai's angry voice came from the distance. You old geezers, you even got this old woman fall for it and die alongside you. At the end of the forest, Blind's expression became solemn. He propped himself on his cane to rest while Butcher swung his knives. Around them was a layered space that kept changing in a peculiar way. This space was layered, and every time it changed, the scenery would transform as well. Sometimes it was a vast forest, and sometimes it was a blistering hot desert. Sometimes it was waves overflowing to the sky, and sometimes it was stars from space flying into their faces. Every time it changed, a different restricted law would burst forth. When the power of the divine restrictions hidden in the space activated, Butcher would need to clash with them. Butcher shouted angrily, Blind, Granny, my waist is about to break. Have you two finished resting? Blind sighed. I'm old and my bones aren't like before, let me rest a while more. I ain't much younger than you, Butcher said angrily. Furthermore, my lower body was just reattached and it's not as strong. If I have to continue fighting, my upper and lower bodies will separate for you to see. Blind said slowly, Granny is still young, let her take over. An old voice came from Granny Sai's mouth and sneered, even though I'm very strong, my wife's body can't withstand it anymore. Wife, let me take over your body. Scram. Granny Sai said angrily. Butcher and Blind's expression turned weird. Granny Sai's illness was becoming more and more severe. After she had found them and they met danger again and again, Li Qianxing frequently jumped out and took control of her body. The devil's seed is becoming stronger and stronger. Old woman Sai will be replaced by Li Qianxing sooner rather than later. The changing of the space around them was like a god throwing a dice. Each side of the dice represented a divine restriction, and they were in that dice. On which side the dice landed on, the divine restriction on it would activate. However, this wasn't a 6-sided dice, but one which had 108 sides. Now they landed on the side of the stars, and the land under their feet disappeared as their surroundings transformed into a boundless starry sky. There was nothing above them and no land below them. The flashing stars were not real stars but mirrors. Suddenly, the lights from them gathered together and shone at the trio with a hum. Butcher shouted out and slashed at the terrifying divine light, with every cloud has a silver lining. The divine light split into half and brushed past their bodies, destroying everything that was not immediately behind Butcher. Granny Sai immediately shouted, "Def, Def, come here quickly." On the other side of the starry sky, Def drew with a brush and contended with the stars. Blind said, "Def can't hear your voice." Before he could finish saying that, Def tried to fly over. A starlight unexpectedly hit him, and he was blown away, disappearing somewhere. "Butcher, rest for a while, it's my turn," Li Qianxing's voice said from Granny Sai's mouth. Butcher immediately moved back, and Granny Sai went forward. The body circulated great educational heavenly devil scriptures, and carefully looked at the changes of the space surrounding them. It was not only the three of them who were trapped in the layered space. Deaf, Old Ma, and Cripple were also trapped, but they were in different sides of the dice, which made it difficult for them to regroup. When Granny Sai came and saw Blind and the rest trapped inside, she had tried to unravel this restriction. But to her surprise, she had fallen in as well. Later, Deaf found his way here and also tried to solve this restriction, but got swept in instead. This space restriction has 108 divine restrictions, but the central administration that operates these formations is not within this 108 sides. Blind stood up, and his godmind's eyes were as penetrating as a mirror as he looked in all directions. Our bodies are in the dice of a god. Old Ma and Cripple are on another side, but they still land in the same side sometimes. Deaf will also enter this plane once in a while, which means that the space restriction had operated for too long and there is already slight deviation in its mathematical calculation. He did some mental calculations, and his eyebrows suddenly rose. The god that laid down this space restriction had only calculated to the Shun-Chi decimal fraction, he didn't calculate to the smallest decimal. After this divine restriction operates for a period of time, it will crumble by itself. By then, the space restriction had changed into the volcano whose divine flames were like dragons. With thunder and lightning booming out, Granny Sai tried her best to contend against them as Li Qianxing spoke with her mouth. "How much longer until this restriction crumbles by itself?" Blind calculated for a moment and said, 24,000 years. "Shut up, Blind!" Butcher shouted out, wanting nothing more than to hack him into half with a knife. At this moment, a voice came from outside, "Brat, your elders are trapped inside, there are 6 of them." In the space restriction, everyone was astonished and looked outside, but they couldn't see anything. Blind was extremely nervous as he commanded sternly, "Mua, don't come in. You don't have the power to withstand the divine restrictions." Qin Mu's voice came from outside, "Devil King, do you have a way to save them?" This space restrictions use a secret technique of space matrix to layer 109 spaces, separating them into 108 sections. It might look like there is 108 of them, but there's actually 109. That voice then continued, "However, the god that laid down this secret technique of space matrix should have taken the easy way out, and not calculated all the way to the smallest possible decimal, which was why some flaws were left. This secret technique will automatically crumble after operating for 24,000 years, but if one managed to find the 109th space, it shouldn't be hard to solve this. Give me a moment to calculate." In the space restriction, Granny Sai, Butcher, and the rest looked at one another. The person beside Qin Mu Shaw is remarkable, to be able to see the marvel of this restriction with a look. He's much more reliable than Blind. After a while, that voice spoke again, "Do you have some treasure you don't use? Something that's quite solid, so I can throw it into the 109th space." If a solid thing entered that place, it would be something like an extra object appearing in operating gears, automatically jamming them. This formation would then be naturally solved. Qin Mu then said, "I picked this up in Roland's Golden Palace, is it useful? This treasure isn't bad. For you to pick up this kind of treasure, you sure are lucky. No wonder I couldn't trick you, your luck is heaven-defying, so it's not me that's incapable. Just as he was saying that, Granny Sai and the rest saw a luminous pearl flying in front of them. That pearl grew bigger and bigger until there seemed to be mountains and rivers within. It was as if there was a complete world in the pearl with majestic mountain ranges and never-ending waterfalls. The luminous pearl streaked across the horizon, having become an enormous object. The circular sky had mountains and rivers which disappeared the next instant. Be careful, when the restriction is unraveled, it will be a little rough, the voice outside warned. Just as he finished, violent tremors suddenly came from the depths of the space. The layers of space crumbled one after another, while the land, water, fire, and wind poured forth frantically, sweeping across everything. The power of the divine restrictions in each layer of space cracked, and terrifying energy spewed out in all directions. The people who were in the restriction immediately roused their vital chi to execute their strongest defensive methods to fight against this violent energy. Luckily for them, this energy wasn't directed at them, but was simply spewing out in all directions, so they could still handle it. If it was directed at them, they would have definitely been shattered into pieces. Qin Mu stood in front of a part of the forest, which had suddenly turned into ashes. The surging shockwave had swept in all directions and turned all trees into fine powder. Thud, 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 thud. 4 figures appeared out of nothing and crashed heavily against the ground, creating pits beneath them. Qin Mu shook his head. So old yet can't spare people from worrying. Cripple, move away. Def's voice came from above as this elder fell upside down from the sky. Below him, Cripple gave a grunt as Def crashed onto him. In mid-air, the aura of Buddha shone brightly as a huge Buddha descended. A golden spring poured out from the ground and a lotus bloomed inside it. The huge Buddha placed his legs down and stepped onto the lotus. The lotus and golden spring vanished, and the great Buddha dispersed, turning into an elder in green. He was none other than Old Ma, and despite his clothes being slightly tattered, he was in a much better state than the rest. Everyone got up and looked at one another. They had actually survived and come out of that space. Even though they had all suffered heavy injuries, none of them were fatal. Everyone raised their heads to see Qin Mu standing in the distance. The youth of disabled elderly village kept shaking his head in disdain at them, becoming even more unreliable as they got older. In front of Qin Mu stood a proud iron lump. With his 8 arms on his waist, he was like a lantern, and had a look that expected them to worship him. Behind Qin Mu was a dragon Chileen that was as fat as a pig. He looked like he still hadn't fully woke up from sleep and was sluggish, having no interest in anything. Mua, why are you here? Granny Sai was astonished and came forward to size Qin Mu up. After examining him, she grumbled, how dare you barge into such a dangerous place? You're too gutsy, are you hurt anywhere? Granny, stay farther away from him. Blind went up, slightly nervous as he looked at Qin Mu. Granny Sai is somewhat unable to handle the devil seed in her Dao heart. She's sometimes male and sometimes female, and we don't know when she'll be taken over by Li Tianxing. Be careful of her laying her hands on you. An old voice came from Granny Sai's mouth, which was filled with a devilish nature. Don't worry, he is the current cult master of our sacred cult. As the previous cult master, I naturally won't lay my hands on him. Suddenly, Granny Sai's voice became female again. Li Tianxing, go back. Cripple went forward and sized up Juqian, Devil King, who had his 8 arms on his waist. Mua, your iron lump sure is useful. What's his name again? Old Ma said, Juqian Devil King. Butcher came forward to have a look and asked suspiciously, where did you get him? The last I saw you didn't have this iron fellow. He's still pretty useful. So ugly, Def said. Juqian Devil King became furious and wanted to blow up, but Qin Mu swiftly interrupted. This is Juqian Devil King, the supreme ruler of Juqian world, which I have invited to save all of you. He has extremely high attainments in divine restrictions, so he can definitely bring us to safety. Juqian Devil King instantly became happy. This brat still knows what to say, even though his intentions are a little bad, his methods a little cruel, his heart a little too cautious. Where's village chief? Qin Mu asked. As well as Grandpa Apothecary and Grandpa Mute, did they reach this place? Blind shook his head. My eyesight is good and I saw traces of Apothecary and village chief, but I didn't see Mute. The other people nodded silently. Granny Sai said, Apothecary and village chief should have faced no problems since they are together. There's also Patriarch and Elder of Discipline with them. However, we haven't seen Mute and this fellow never says a word. Whatever he plans to do, he won't share it with us. If he's alone, I reckon he'd find it hard to hold on. Mua, this place is so dangerous yet you still had to find your way here, you've had it hard. Qin Mu instantly got angry. All of you wandered off instead of coming back home for New Year's. If you got lost, what could I do but come and find you? Devil King, you shall lead the way. And you all, stop wandering off. En. The bunch of elderly nodded in a flurry. Jiutian Devil King raised his head up high as he brought the old, weak, sick, and disabled elders of disabled elderly village forward. There are many able-bodied people in the village, so why is it called disabled elderly village, he thought to himself. Disabled elderly village today no longer fit its name. It even had young people like Granny Sai and Qin Mu in the village, so the word elderly itself owed some discussion. Old Ma, Butcher, and Cripple were already able-bodied, while Granny Sai might still be disabled in her heart, her body was fine. The only ones who were still missing parts of their body were blind, apothecary, village chief, mute, and deaf. However, Jiutian Devil King didn't know that to the people of disabled elderly village, the disability of the body was not a disability. Their true disabilities lay in their hearts. Village chief was exhausted from not being able to fulfill his responsibility, which left him disheartened. Even if he was able-bodied, he still wouldn't walk out of great ruins. Apothecary had sliced his face off due to the pressure caused by the debts of relationships. Even if he regained the looks of his golden age, he still wouldn't dare to go out and face people. The reason why Blind was down was not because he had turned blind. And even though Old Ma had regained both his hands, he still couldn't pull himself together after the death of his wife and child. He was still unable to forgive himself. Granny Sai's heart devil, Cripple's past, Deaf's homeland, Mute's mysterious past, and the reason Butcher raised his knives at heaven were all shackles that restrained them. The disability in their heart was their true disability. They had sunk into a sorrowful past and were unable to break free of it. This was the reason behind disabled elderly village. If it was not because the child they had raised ran out, the people of disabled elderly village would have stayed quietly in the village and awaited their deaths, digging a pit to bury themselves. Qin Mu's arrival had gradually livened their hearts, but even he couldn't make them walk out of the past that had left them disabled. The true disability is when both the body and the heart are disabled. Because of this, these people could only rely on themselves to walk out. Jiutian Devil King was truly the Devil King of another world. He knew so much that even Blind was endlessly impressed by his knowledge and concrete details. Jiutian Devil King had completely convinced him with his attainments in algebra. They came to the border of the forest, which was near the end. There were only 2 more miles or so, but Jiutian Devil King had to spend half a day just to cross these 2 miles. It's New Year's Eve, Granny Sai suddenly said. Old Ma shook his head. It's not considered New Year's until all the people of the village are present. Butcher's voice was loud like a bell. We must find village chief, mute, and apothecary, see their bodies. Even if they are dead, we'll drag them back for New Year's. There was no more path in front of them, just the crumbling carefree village. There was no more land here at the end of the forest, but a clean cross-section. Standing at the edge of the cliff, Qin Mu looked down and saw another forest. He couldn't help being stunned. Another forest? He said in astonishment, this forest grows on the cliff, so how are the trees perpendicular to the ground? Jiutian Devil King jumped off the cliff and gave a thump as he stood steadily on the side. His body was perpendicular to Qin Mu's as he walked to and fro. The seal here is much more complicated than what I thought. It's formed by a cube which seals Carefree Village within it, controlling the electromagnetic force of this place. You guys will know when you walk over here to take a look. Qin Mu stretched out his leg carefully, and suddenly felt an attraction force below his feet. Placing his feet down and lifting up the other leg, he realized that he was standing on the cliffside without any discomfort. Not only that, from where he stood, it seemed like was standing at the edge of the cliff while Granny Sai, Old Ma, and the rest were standing on the cliffside. Only he and Jiutian Devil King were standing on flat ground. He looked around and was slightly shook. He saw that the opposite side also had a forest that was perpendicular to the ground. Other than that, the sky in the other directions also had forests. This kind of situation was like pieces of land wrapping around Carefree Village to form an enormous hollow ball. However, looking from the geography, it didn't seem like a simple hollow ball. It seemed to be pieced together by thousands of cubes of different heights, while at the center of it was Carefree Village. Every cube was 1,000 miles of forest that was folded up, and every side of the cube was the obverse side. This kind of divine art was beyond what he could imagine. Even an existence like Imperial Preceptor wouldn't have been able to imagine that such a divine art could exist in this world, right? The electromagnetic force here has changed. Blind also walked over and felt the force of attraction. This great divine art is no small matter to cover the entire Carefree Village. I'm afraid the only exit is the place from which we came. Countless seals, just to prevent the people of Carefree Village from walking out. Granny Sai also walked over and raised her head to look at the debris of Carefree Village floating silently. They were still quite a distance away from it, and she said, "Village chief and patriarch possess remarkable abilities, so they should have gone in there, right?" Jiutian Devil King raised his head and walked back onto the path they had come from before, shaking his head. There are many restrictions in the sky, and it would be hard to avoid them if one was to fly over. I would need to calculate for some 30-50 years to find the safest path. If my true body was here, I could do it faster, but it would still take me 1 or 2 years. The god that left behind this seal is too strong, not something that you guys can handle. If anyone tried to fly into Carefree Village, they are most likely dead. He muttered, "The entire Great Ruins is a cursed land, with a peculiar rule that shrouds it. It's really hard to live in a world like this, so Cult Master Qin, even if you invite me into this world, I won't come back again. This world is too twisted." Blind muttered, "Village chief is definitely alive. That old fellow doesn't take anything seriously, but once he does take something seriously, he will definitely be able to do it. Wait a minute, don't you guys think that the shape of Carefree Village looks like a ship?" Everyone raised their head to look. Carefree Village was extremely huge, but even though it was in ruins, they could still see the glorious and magnificent sight it was in the olden days. There was also a sun that was about to sink into the darkness hanging farther away. However, if they piece these shattered peaks, huge pieces of machinery, and the destroyed city together, its shape did indeed look like a huge and grand ship that was inconceivable. In comparison, the sun and the moon ships were nothing. Carefree Village is a ship. Qin Mu felt it was too much for his brain to handle. Even though the sun in the sky was a man-made one, it was extremely huge. If the city and mountains were combined, it would become even larger, and surpass the size of the sun and the moon ship by 1,000 times. Could there be such a huge ship in this world? Great observation, Blind. Cripple's eyes lighted up, and his breaths became rapid as he pointed towards the sun that was half consumed by darkness. This sun should be the source of energy for this ship. It's a huge pill furnace, an unimaginably huge pill furnace. Granny Sai rolled her eyes at him. "You can't carry it home." Jiutian Devil King was also slightly shaken and said under his breath, "Such a huge pill furnace, what was this ship used for? Why is it sealed here? Could it be? Ha ha ha, I must be thinking too much." He laughed coarsely and didn't speak another word. Old Ma said, "Ships are used for ferrying passengers. They bring people to their destination, so this ship must have its own destination as well." Deaf, who had been silent, suddenly said, "Isn't it Carefree Village? Carefree Village is carefree, so why does it need a destination? With a destination, it won't be Carefree Village anymore. If it's not Carefree Village, What's its destination? Everyone looked at one another in the eyes and said in unison, the true carefree village. Qin Mu stared blankly. The guess of these elders from his village left him even more at a loss. True carefree village, wasn't this place carefree village? However, what Old Ma and the rest said made sense. Since such a huge ship was constructed, it definitely had its destination, and the destination of this ship might really be the true carefree village. Yet this ship was discovered by the enemy which had destroyed and sealed it. The people who were lucky enough to survive tried to escape from the seal, but ended up suffering disastrous casualties. They had then spent countless years to pave a way out. The devils in the darkness were also searching for Carefree Village, and even thought that this was Carefree Village. However, this was only a ship that was headed to Carefree Village. If Carefree Village is not here, where's the true Carefree Village? Qin Mu was at a loss. Where exactly is my hometown? Did any of my clansmen survive? His mind was in a mess, and at this moment, a silver light flashed across the sky. A silver boat flew out from the city, and on that silver boat stood Mute, who was holding onto a wooden chest. On the boat were also two white-haired elders, a faceless man and a youth. Mute controlled the silver boat, flying nimbly in the air to avoid the divine restrictions in the sky. Jiutian Devil King was dumbfounded. The path that the silver boat was taking now was the safest path, that he had to take dozens of years to calculate. This silver boat ferrying the people traveled back and forth among the divine restrictions. It was like a clever fish going in all directions to avoid all kinds of danger. After some time, the silver boat descended from the sky and landed in front of the group. Apothecary carried out village chief and walked down the boat while the young patriarch shook his head. Why do you have to carry him? He can clearly fly by himself. Apothecary was stunned and placed village chief upright on the ground with a smile. I'm already used to it. Qin Mu and the rest immediately came forward, and Mute opened up the wooden chest. The silver boat melted and turned into silver pellets, which went tinkling into the wooden chest. Mute closed the lid with skill and picked up the chest. When he saw everyone walking over, he revealed a grin and waved his hand. Ah. Everyone went forward and surrounded the newcomers, full of all kinds of questions for everyone, especially Mute. How did he know about the safe path, that even the extremely knowledgeable Jiutian Devil King required dozens of years to calculate? What exactly did they see when they went into the city in the sky? Was that place Carefree Village or not? Were there any survivors? Everyone was about to say something when village chief floated over and smiled at Qin Mu. Mua, let me tell you a piece of good news. We have finally found your surname. Apothecary, hand the things to him. Apothecary poured out many things from his pouch. There was a waist tag, bronze mirrors, a horizontally inscribed board, an imprint, a jade pendant, and some clothes. On all of these items, there was one word: Qin. Your surname is Qin. Apothecary smiled. There are many such items in that city, and village chief asked me to gather a few. Look at the handwriting on them, doesn't it look like the handwriting on your jade pendant? Qin Mu's mind was blown. He looked back at the small village he had passed by on the way here. A flicker of hope reignited in his heart. Village chief seemed to know what he was thinking and said, that place may or may not be where you were born, and that family may or may not be your parents. There is still a chance that your parents are alive. This video will end here.